Our programs offer many languages. Please visit suprememastertv.com/schedule.
Nos programmes offrent plusieurs langues. Veuillez visiter suprememastertv.com/schedule.
Nuestros programas ofrecen varios idiomas. Visiten suprememastertv.com/schedule.
Манай нэвтрүүлгүүд олон хэлээр гардаг зочлог хаяг suprememastertv.com/schedule.
Only the life review I had was that I suffered all the pain that I gave away in my entire life, each individual incident of it in a sequence, but I didn't see it from the outside. My second near-death experience put me into a bit of a tizzy. When I first came back, I had no idea what this thing was anymore. When I first came back, I had to figure out how to move my fingers and feel and eat and what it is to breathe and think. I see the light inside all sentient beings. The difference with human beings is that the personas that we live within create the illusion of value. Everyone is particularly loved and beloved in an egalitarian way. When I was dead, I perceived that God was beyond all religion, because it was beyond, the divine being is beyond all concept and understanding and containment. The word eternal itself, or infinite, means that it can't be contained within concept.
Heaven is Beautiful. Near-Death Experiences of Reverend Peter Panagore, Part 1 of 4. Continue watching to find out more.
Guten Tag, Grüß Gott means good day and God bless you in German. I'm Henry. The people of Germany thank you for all the acts of kindness you perform for those around you, helping to create heaven on earth. Welcome to part 1 of 4 of our series, Heaven is Beautiful, Near-Death Experiences of Reverend Peter Panagore. Reverend Peter Panagore is an internationally renowned church pastor, inspirational speaker and devotional storyteller who has written several books, including the best-selling Heaven is Beautiful, How Dying Taught Me That Death is Just the Beginning. As a former pastor of the First Radio Parish Church of America, his uplifting program, Daily Devotions, was broadcast every day for 15 years with 30 million views annually. Throughout his life, Reverend Panagore has had 2 near-death experiences, or NDEs. In our series, Reverend Panagore shares what he experienced when he seemingly died and how these remarkable events transformed his life. He begins by telling us about his first NDE.
In 1980, I was ice climbing and Banff Provincial Park, which is in Western Canada, my partner Tim. And I made a mistake in my equipment, which slowed our climb down and put us in danger. We reached the top of the climb by sunset when all the other teams had descended. We fought our way through the night with hypothermia and frostbite to get to the last rappel sometime before dawn. And hypothermia advanced to the stage of falling asleep. And that's the end game. I was clipped into the mountain. We were off the ice on the rock, and I began to fall asleep. And when I would fall asleep, I would collapse and strike the rock and wake up. And I pulled myself up this one time. And as I stood up, my peripheral vision became like a fade to black on a stage in the theater where the spotlight is wide across the stage and narrows down very rapidly to a singular point of blackness. And suddenly I felt myself collapse as I thought I had done before when I was falling asleep, only this time my consciousness remained intact and my brain didn't shut off with sleep. And I wondered to myself, what's going on here? I'm experiencing something I'd never experienced before, and the darkness suddenly expanded in front of me to infinite size. Everything I say is in metaphor. It's very difficult to put into language. I saw a little tiny spot of light come rushing toward me and expanding to fill my entire vision, only it wasn't light like a photon. It was an intelligence beyond my capacity for understanding, and it communicated to me telepathically, I'm taking you. And I said, no, you're not. And it took me against my will and carried me. And I was not afraid. I was in a place of comfort, and I was being carried by this entity that was projecting comfort into me. And the next thing I knew, I was popped out or into an eternal-sized, greater, illuminated darkness. And I was a singular orb of consciousness that was all of my senses, my smell, taste, touch, hearing, thoughts were all one thing. And I was much larger than I am as a human being. And the first thing I realized was, this is who I am. Now I remember. How could I have forgotten? This is what I am. And I could see in every direction at once, and I could see nothing. It was eternal, illuminated darkness, but I was unafraid. I'm in a place of all time and no time. And a portal, a doorway, an opening appeared in front of me, and I could see through this translucent and transparent flow of a shimmer of a doorway. I could see this elongated eternal tunnel, and I reached out with my soul self, and I touched the surface area of this translucent and transparent flow, and it was all life, all living, all being, all loving, all eternity. It was all energy, and it flowed into me. And when it flowed into me, I heard my soul name called, and not Peter at all, but the name that created my very essence of my being. And simultaneously, I saw myself as this elongated, everlasting soul that had an origin that I was spoken into being. The name I heard was unspeakable, and no tongue, I can't say it. I just knew that when the word was spoken, that I was created into all beingness. It's like I could see a singular photon, and I was that photon, and it was wave and particle simultaneously. It was part of the entity of all beingness and separate from it at the same time. And I saw the long tail of myself and my soul, and I then understood that I was utterly known, and I'd always been known and always beloved.
This is indeed a very inspirational experience. During his NDEs, Reverend Peter Panagore learned many lessons about love and why we must always treat others with kindness and compassion.
I heard a voice that had no sound telepathically speak inside me saying, I love you, I made you, I know you, nothing of you is hidden from me. And then I saw my life review. Only the life review I had was that I suffered all the pain that I gave away in my entire life, each individual incident of it in a sequence, but I didn't see it from the outside. I watched it from the perspective and felt the feeling of the individuals to whom I caused the pain. Only the little bit of pain that I thought that I caused was actually 10,000 times magnified what I had imagined that I had given them in the circumstance that I had done it, only I hadn't really given it to them, I'd given it to myself. And that there was no distance between the one who I caused to suffer and the suffering that I experienced. And it was all of the pain that was intentional and all of the pain that was unintentional in my life. I felt all of this suffering, but meanwhile, the voice was saying to me, I know you, I love you, I've always known you, I've always loved you, you are my creature, I am creator, I made you, I love you as you are. And the pain that you caused is not your fault. It's because you were made a creature. And I could see all humanity's suffering that they caused to everyone. The result of being born into the world is the capacity for love and the capacity to cause pain, and those two coexist. And it seemed to me that I carried all this pain with me, but the thing that I carried with me most of all was all the love that I'd given away in my life and all the love that had been given to me in my life. And the love itself became the treasure of my being, which caused me to understand the divine power of love.
This deeper understanding about the divine power of love transformed Reverend Panagore, causing him to redirect his career. During his NDE, he also learned another important lesson.
Yes, it seems like every action that I took in my life was recorded. Some people call it the book of life. Every action that I took in my entire life was recorded, was known, utterly, absolutely known. And the pain that I caused other people in my life, I carried with me back into heaven. It was a weight upon me. And only through the divine period of fire of love was I relieved or cleansed of that which I did not need to carry with me. And I describe it in my book as hell. Now I think of it in terms of the Catholic language of purgatory. In order to be filled with the oneness of being, I had to abandon my own concept of self. And what gave me the strength to endure that was the love that was given to me. Love turns out to be the absolute universal treasure of life. It's the inbuilt thing inside all humanity that allows us access to the divine. It was the purity of love that saved me. And maybe that's, Jesus came and he talked about love thy neighbor as thyself. He was talking about the power of the divine, of love.
Heaven is Beautiful, Near-Death Experiences of Reverend Peter Panagore, Part 2 of 4. Continue watching to find out more.
On today's show, he describes how his second NDE redirected his life.
When I cause people pain, I now know that I'm going to be forgiven, which doesn't give me permission to hurt people. It's just the opposite of that. Knowing that God is all love makes me aspire to be the best that I can be. It makes me understand that every time I love someone else or have an action of kindness, that it's an accumulation inside myself of the treasure of heaven. So in my body now, I reoriented my life completely. I changed the course of my career. I changed the class, the graduate program I was going to go into. I ended up going into ministry, which is from my point of view, a servant sort of living. It's a profession of compassion. And so I try to live as compassionately as I possibly can. I'm willing to stand up when I have to stand up to be courageous, but only in the servanthood of love, not for self-serving purposes.
Reverend Panagore says that life here on earth is just an illusion. He next shares why he believes this is so.
It seems to me that the body and the senses, how we perceive the world, including our brain, is part of the veil itself. It's sort of, I like to use the metaphor of the Matrix movies without the evil machine overlords. Replace that with an all-loving divine. The whole universe is an illusion. It's a place where we live, but it's not what we are. And it seemed to me, it doesn't seem to me, it actually is to me, that the only reality is the divine itself. And when I say this universe, I mean from the Big Bang to the expanding edge and all the galaxies in between and all the star systems and every single molecule of dark matter, everything, all of it, the whole thing is a place where we live. It's not who we are. It's not where we're from. We're in this container. The veil is this thing that both enables us to experience the richness and fullness of life, but it prevents us also from perceiving more clearly the presence of the divine in all things. And so it's necessary to be here, but it also gets in our way. And what gives me real hope is that every single human being, in the moment that they die, they're going to find this out for themselves. I don't really care if anybody believes me, because they're going to find out, you're all going to find out for yourselves. And the length of life is the wink of an eye. That's what I saw, was that the 20 years I had lived was that long. It's nothing in comparison to eternity. And that it was very, very clear to me that the only reality that there is the divine. And so I live my life through that truth, which makes it a little more difficult to live in the world when my eyeball is always tuned into the divine, and less so here.
Reverend Peter Panagore has had 2 near-death experiences during his lifetime. In both instances, when he returned to life on Earth, he suffered through a long and difficult period of adjustment.
My second near-death experience put me into a bit of a tizzy. But yeah, when I first came back, I had no idea what this thing was anymore. When I first came back, I had to figure out how to move my fingers and feel and eat and what it is to breathe and think. And I felt like I was alien, a stranger inside of a strange machine. And I knew that I was not this thing. The world seemed to me to be two-dimensional and black and white in comparison to the three-dimensional beauty of heaven. I was in a flat cartoon, and I had a very difficult time trying to figure out what had happened to me, because I didn't bring back all the knowledge that I had on the other side, because my brain couldn't contain it. So my soul still knows much of it, or all of it, for all I know, but my brain can't contain it. And so I went through this period, an initial period of several months of trying to keep my mouth shut and trying to figure out exactly what had happened to me. Fortunately for me, I had begun meditation practice many years before, and I dove into my meditation thinking that that was the only way that I was going to figure out what had happened to me. I went into a long-term depression, probably 10 years of utter sadness and longing for the oneness of being. I know that I chose to come back, but I was very angry at God for having sent me back without more information, because there was this roaring lion inside of me screaming at me all the time without language. Speak about this, tell about this. And I didn't have any language for it, and I didn't want to talk about it. And all I wanted to do was die and go home again. And so it took a long time to readjust, and I ended up going to divinity school, to architecture school, to study mysticism. So I did an independent 3-year study at Yale of the history of mysticism in the West, and primarily Western culture, in order to adopt or find language that I could structure around my experience. I dove inside myself. And I guess the biggest way that I learned to readjust was by diving interiorly. I found that Jesus was right, that if you seek heaven above all things, if you focus on the oneness of being, you get access to it. And so I wanted access to it. I wanted to strip away as much of myself as I possibly could to create a larger channel inside myself so that I could have access to the divine. Through meditative practices, I opened myself up to a rapture of grace. I lifted outside of myself and brought into the divine presence of the oneness of being, and visions. I have visions of heaven and light. It's the power of the divine itself, uplifting me out of myself and sending me back to my body and giving me the gift of a series of gifts of reintegration, helping my feet be here. I live with one eye always on heaven and one eye here, and one foot always in this world and one foot in heaven. And so my reintegration here is trying to, I still live mostly on the other side. It's trying to be in this world and pass or function as a normal human being. And that's been a journey for me.
He tells us about the angel he met during his NDE.
I refer to the intelligent being who plucked me out of my body as my friend, the angel of death. But not like an angel with wings, but an intelligence that was beyond my capacity for understanding. And a presence that was both present to me in and of itself, but also a being that has divine direct connection to the wholeness of all. And when I died the second time, in 2015 of a heart attack, the same angel of death came for me. Only this time, I knew the angel. I already knew what was going on. I was dying, and there's the angel of death. Come home, it's your time to come home. It seems to me that angel is always with me. And never not with me, and has always been with me. So I think that some people perceive angels and some people don't. Some people hear them, some people are saved by them, some people hear don't turn left here, and you don't turn left and a semi-trailer truck misses you. That kind of stuff happens all the time. So I think that angels communicate with people.
Heaven is Beautiful, Near-Death Experiences of Reverend Peter Panagore, Part 3 of 4. Continue watching to find out more.
On today's episode, we continue our discussion with international best-selling author, professional speaker, and widely renowned devotional broadcaster, Reverend Peter Panagore, who has had 2 near-death experiences, or NDEs, that profoundly shaped his life. Peter explains that his NDEs greatly intensified his desire to turn inward, since his first NDE He has devoted time each day to meditation and prayer.
One of the side effects of near-death experience, and there's a lot of them, or after effects as people call them, can be a more direct relationship to the divine. And I think a life of meditation and prayer opens one's spiritual ear up wider, and one's spiritual eye becomes clearer.
Reverend Panagore has practiced meditation for more than 40 years. A few years ago, he had a remarkable inner experience. One evening, when he returned home after hosting a late-night broadcast program, he tried to rest. However, he found himself unable to sleep, so he decided to meditate instead.
I decided to meditate. And as soon as I began my chant, I was plucked out of myself and carried, how do I describe this? It's like it wasn't my soul self. It was more like a combination of soul and spirit. People talk about their astral body. It was more like an astral body thing, but not as defined. And so I was plucked and pulled outside myself and brought into an ocean of sound. Some people call it the choir of angels or the cosmic music, but it was the most beautiful, complex sound of frequencies that pervaded the existence of all of the space that I was in. And it seemed like it was above the material world, but it penetrated into the material world. But I was in some sort of heaven, and I was also an individuated sphere of this very same sound of cosmic love frequency, the most beautiful music. And I was being raised up through this ocean, maybe carried by my angel, and I was raised rapidly up through this ocean of the divine self, of sound, of music. All things are made of this frequency. And as I got to the very top of it, I approached the very edge of light itself. And as I got to the light, my mind became active again, and I was plummeted out, back into my body. And over the next 3 hours, I would pulse between this world and that world. And when I would close my eyes, I would be raptured out of myself and brought into the divine healing frequency of beauty and love and fullness of being. And in between, when I was back in my body, I was lying on the sofa. I remember hearing the kids working on their homework in the other room, and I closed my eyes and I'm out of myself, and I open my eyes again, and my wife is standing there, and I close my eyes and I'm out of myself. And so I'm pulsing back and forth between these two worlds, and each time I don't go as far as I did before. And I opened my eyes and it was over, and I began to feel back in my body again, only once again I was feeling the stress of being not my soul self, being contained inside this physical thing that I didn't understand anymore, and I didn't remember who Peter was. I just knew that I was this frequency, I was this love, I was this sound, I was this music, and I was not this thing.
Peter explains that all human beings, rich or poor, high-ranking or living in rags, have the same inner light of the divine. But what about animals? Do they also have this radiant inner light?
I see the light inside all sentient beings. The difference with human beings is that the personas that we live within create the illusion of value. This person's more valuable than that person. The homeless person is less valuable than the CEO. That's just not true. It's not true because they're all divinely loved by God in an equal way. Everyone is particularly loved and beloved in an egalitarian way. And I see animals the same way. I look in their eyes and I see the light. And I don't see a difference between the light inside my dog's eyes or the light inside a human's eyes. It's still the same radiant light. Animals are divine beings made of light, just like human beings are.
Reverend Panagore shares another story about animals. One time, when he was a student attending Yale University, he decided to visit a Trappist monastery. During his stay there, he had an interesting experience with a little chickadee.
And so I went to the monastery, and before my meeting with my monk, I was there for several days. I went out I was a bird watcher at the time. And so I decided to go bird watching. They had 2,000 acres of property. And so I took off my shoes and I decided to go on a super silent, very focused bird watch, which to me meant walking meditation. Every step I took was total consciousness of feeling exactly where I was. Break no twig, brush no leaf, move with control and breath. And so I was on this bird watch, and I'm listening, and I round this corner, and I hear the song of a black-capped chickadee. And I stop, and I'm very quiet interiorly. And I listen, and the bird comes closer to sing and closer to sing, and suddenly it lands on this branch above me. And I'm looking at it, and I put my finger up. I lift my finger up for it. And it comes down and it lands on my finger. And then it leaps from my finger and it comes up and it touches its beak to my nose and its talons to my chin, and it beats my cheeks with its wings, and it flies back up to the branch. And I'm still very peaceful and very centered and not thinking, just breathing, just being. And I look into its eyes. And when I look into its eyes, I see the divine light inside it. And I know that it sees exactly the same divine light inside of me. And it's not a separate light. It's not his light or her light and my light. It's one light. I understood at that moment that all breathing beings, whether they breathe water or air on earth, are made of the very same light as I am, and that they have the same connection to the divine as I do. And the truth is that animals are divine as well as human beings. The fish and the birds and the deer in the woods, even the fisher cat and the skunk, they're all made of divine light, just like me, just like you. I feel the radiance from them, and I feel it from trees. I feel it from flowers. I feel it's everywhere all the time. Everything is made of this. Every molecule, everything is made of light. Everything is made of love. Living beings, plants and animals. And so when I encounter an animal, a cow or a horse or a dog, or I can just feel the divine self inside them.
Reverend Peter Panagore, thank you for sharing your precious, insightful, and blissful experiences. We are grateful for your wisdom and kindness.
For more information about Reverend Peter Panagore, please visit www.peterpanagore.love.
Heaven is Beautiful, Near-Death Experiences of Reverend Peter Panagore, Part 4 of 4. Continue watching to find out more.
Welcome to the concluding episode of Heaven is Beautiful, Near-Death Experiences of Reverend Peter Panagore. Peter is an international best-selling author, professional speaker, and widely renowned devotional broadcaster who has had 2 near-death experiences that profoundly changed his life. On today's episode, Reverend Panagore discusses how he came to understand that God's existence extends far beyond any religious dogma.
When I was dead, I perceived that God was beyond all religion, because it was beyond, the divine being is beyond all concept and understanding and containment. The word eternal itself, or infinite, means that it can't be contained within concept. There's no gender, there's no physicality, there's no matter whatsoever. And all these words of definition aren't adequate. They don't even come close. One God, oneness of being beyond capacity for humanity to understand and comprehend. It's not like the Christian God or the Muslim God or the Jewish God. Those categories didn't exist for me. The divine being is oneness of love. And that's the definition that I use the most, because it's the most universally understood. Everybody understands love. But more to the point, God is all love and beyond all love. And so when I came back, I was a person of faith and belief before I went. I came back with no faith and no belief. And not only just in religion, but in all culture and language and history and all human constructs are illusory to me. They are necessary for functionality in the world. Even language is an artificial concept. None of that is real to me. All that's real to me is the divine presence itself. And so I came back without faith or belief because I came back with knowledge. I know God is real. I'm not interested in convincing anybody because I know that I can't convince them. You can only find that on your own. But God is the reality beyond realities. And every human being has the capacity of being in the presence of the divine. Atheist, Jan, Jew, Zoroastrian, everybody, Buddhist, doesn't matter. Because at the core of the center of our being is the divine light itself. And whether you perceive it inside yourself or in any other person doesn't really matter, because that's what you are, and you'll find out the day you die.
When Peter had his first NDE, he was afraid to tell others about it. He kept his experience a painful and lonely secret for 20 years, and then realized that people who have NDEs or other mystical experiences need someone to talk to. And so, Reverend Panagore started a counseling service.
I run a global spiritual counseling service for closet mystics because I had no one to talk to for the longest time. And I know that there are mystics all over the world, and they don't know who to talk to about their divine experience. And many of them are professionals, and they're afraid that their careers will be damaged. And many of them are in relationships where their spouse or their partner can't comprehend it, and they have no one to talk to about it. So I offer myself as a counselor for them. And I've had clients in Perth and Brisbane and Istanbul and all over the world. Basically what I do is I listen and I help reflect. I help sort out the experience. I help people understand what a definition of a mystical experience is and what the varieties of it are, and help them understand how to live with it. And in the definition of mystics, I include near-death experiencers. Near-death experience is a variety of mystical experience. It's not an independent thing. It's part of a much larger group of human experience that includes out-of-body experience, raptures into heaven, or indwellings of the divine that are like the totality of the sweetness of all love infills every pore and cell of the body in ecstasy, or the experience of encountering a divine. I'm here to help the individual understand how that experience is real and how to live with it.
We asked Peter why so many more people are having NDEs now than in the past, and are these NDEs playing a role in raising the consciousness on Earth?
Really, the huge big difference is that in the 1960s, cardiac care came online and medical technology, science began raising the dead. And that technology developed over the last 50 years so that there's more capacity for saving lives, they call it, or resuscitation, but it's really raising the dead. And now there's 10 million in the United States who've come back from the dead through medical technology. And imagine that number across the globe as medical technology, science has spread around the world. And so for the first time in the history of the world, science is driving spirituality. And the message that most near-death experiencers come back with is love. That's it, no matter what their experience is, whether they end up in a heaven where they're walking in a field of daisies or they go to the place of non-being like I went, the message is love. There are those who pop out of their body at the ER and they pop right back in, and they don't go far enough to get that message. But what they do come back with is the knowledge that they're not their body. They can no longer pretend that they're made of only matter. And so I think that the biggest impact that near-death experience as a global phenomenon is that for the first time in the history of the world, no matter what your religion is, people are coming back speaking about divine love. Things. And so science has begun researching this and is discovering it's real. Everybody's talking about it now, and it's going to free up all of the other mystics in the world to be able to have conversations about their own spiritual experience that they've been afraid to talk about. And because so many people have had this experience globally now, near-death experience, the conversation, I hope and pray, will begin to shift on a national, international basis. And that the impact of near-death experience based in science can shift the conversation about what it means to be a human being in relationship to each other. And maybe finally, in the first time in the history of the world, we have the coming of the new age. And I'm encouraging everyone to talk to somebody in their own life about their mystical experience, whatever it happens to be, in order to begin a local conversation. You don't have to stand in a soapbox to talk to people. Just tell somebody you love. That's all. Somebody you trust.
We asked Peter about his personal mission in life, and he shared the following thoughts.
I have two missions in life. One is to be grandfather to my granddaughter, to be substitute father, to help her adjust the best that she can in the world. That's my physical mission. But my real mission in life is the mission of everybody, which is to become channels of light, to become another node of the presence of the divine in the world, to bring more light into the presence of the world by getting out of the way of the light. And I think that's everybody's mission, is to love each other. Love each other. That's the mission of life. And for those of us who are more spiritually capable, maybe born that way or find a way to become that way, to simply become a beacon. If we can each become a channel of light, a presence of the divine, then we have an opportunity to evolve spiritually.
At the conclusion of the interview, Reverend Panagore had one final thought to share with our global audience.
All you need to do is love. It's built into humanity. It's like if I were God and I was going to create a way for everyone to find me, I'd build something into them. And what's built into us is our capacity for love. Love each other is the simplest thing there is. You just have to love the people in your life. That's all. That's a very simple thing. Just love each other.
Reverend Peter Panagore, thank you for sharing your experiences and your inner wisdom. May you be blessed abundantly for your great generosity.
For more information about Reverend Peter Panagore, please visit peterpanagore.love.